All right, we're going to get started. We're just about to start. Welcome to the Ethical Humanist Society of Chicago, established in 1882 as the Society for Ethical Culture of Chicago. My name is Kara Malenfant. I'm a member of EHS, and I'll be your moderator for today's talk. We're glad you're joining us, whether you're here in person, I see some new faces, so welcome everyone, or whether you're joining us on our live stream. Today we'll be listening to Andrew Szilva discuss how ranked choice voting impacts American elections. But first, let me just tell you a little bit about EHS. We are a self-governing, inclusive, caring community for those who seek a rational, compassionate philosophy of life. We focus on the ethical values that bring people together, not on the beliefs that keep people apart. In the spirit of intellectual, philosophical, and artistic freedom, we come together to explore life, nature, and the universe. Like traditional religious communities, we celebrate births, conduct wedding ceremonies, and host memorial services. We provide for the ethical education of our children based on rational, critical thinking. Our programs address a wide variety of topics, including philosophy, current events, arts and sciences, to name just a few. Today's presentation is part of our ongoing programming related to politics. Andrew Szilva joined FairVote Illinois in 2019 and became the organization's executive director when it incorporated in 2020. With an undergraduate degree in chemistry from the University of Illinois, a PhD in theoretical chemistry from UCLA, and 2 years as a student researcher in applied mathematics at Princeton, Andrew has a formal scientific and technical background. He also recently completed an MBA and has over 15 years experience in the private sector, managing systems and optimization projects at Fortune 500 companies in the transportation and logistics sectors. He leans on this experience to help coordinate the grassroots organizing efforts that are central to FairVote Illinois' mission. And everything he's doing for FairVote Illinois is as a volunteer. So, wow. Andrew is going to talk for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have a healthy amount of time for your questions. Join me in welcoming Andrew.
Well, thank you. It's really great to be here. And I often think, like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And I think back to my very first time speaking about ranked choice voting, at least to people in the public. And I was at the Women's March right at the beginning of 2020. A bunch of us were out and we were saying, okay, let's just talk about ranked choice voting, why we support it, and hopefully start building up support. And a woman came running up to me, said, let me sign up. And I was like, wow, this is the enthusiasm I was hoping for. This is great. And she was such a supporter, and I asked her why. And she said, well, for her, she was a lucky one. She has a very big, close family. They always celebrate everything together. But during the last Thanksgiving, prior to this Women's March, that didn't happen. They had 2 separate Thanksgivings, divided along party lines. And so for her, this was really, like, completely, politics was tearing her family apart. And that's something we're seeing, all across the country. It definitely feels, and lots of signs of it, that we're a divided nation. And polling suggests that this is in fact the case. Polls after polls show that majority of the public finds that, will report that they think the government's broken, that trust in government's at historic lows or close to it. So we see this over and over again. And you have to ask yourself why. Why is this happening? There's lots of reasons. One of them is the way we vote. In order to win an election, you don't need to win more than 50%. You don't have to be preferred by everyone or even appeal to everybody. You just need to get more than any other candidate. And so what we see in elections is something like this. If you're a Republican and you have people who tell you, hey, whatever you do, don't vote for the Libertarian candidate. You're going to take votes away from the Libertarians, and you're going to hand the election over to those evil Democrats. Or on the other side, it's the same thing. If you want the Green Party candidate, you really love them, you're kind of forced to make a decision because everyone's telling you don't vote for the Green Party candidate, you're going to take votes away from the Democrat, and you're going to get that evil Republican elected. And so, the way we vote drives this. And from a voter's perspective, you have to ask questions. You have to think strategically, like, does my candidate have a chance of winning? Will I be wasting my vote? And then from the candidate's perspective, we know you learn how elections run and what works and what doesn't. And you start thinking about, well, how do I actually win this election? How do I get more votes than any other candidate? Oftentimes that's, how do I make the other leading candidate a villain? And so rather than discussing issues, the way we vote today often leads candidates to do personal attacks and paint the opponent as disqualified or dishonest or even dangerous. And this applies to elections, whether it's single candidates or many people. Whenever there's more than two candidates in an election, we see this vote splitting and we see these results. So I have a few examples from recent Chicago elections. This is the mayoral election of 2019. And in that first round of voting, neither candidate got 20%. So it was about a third of the votes combined for the top two candidates who went for a runoff. Maybe they were the most preferred, but we don't know for sure. In the last mayoral election, a similar thing. The top two candidates, a little bit better this time, but no single candidate even got a third of the vote. And so maybe they were, again, the most preferred, maybe not. But it led to a lot of strategic voting, you had to give thought to who you voted for and who would make that runoff. This happened in Chicago aldermanic districts as well. And here's just one example from the 5th Ward, where, again, low voter, people win with very low percentage of the vote. This is not a democracy. We can do better than this, and we must. And there is a better way, and that's why I'm here today to talk about ranked choice voting. So what is ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting is another way of running elections where you rank the candidates in order of preference. First choice, second choice, third choice. And in order to win, a candidate needs a majority. So to start, we only consider everyone's first choice vote. So, let me go back to my ballot here. In this case, I ranked the candidates. This is my ballot. I voted for Sylvester Cat, number 1. I said Bugs Bunny, I like him a lot. He's number 2. Wile E. Coyote's 3rd. I'm putting him 3rd. Daffy Duck, if I have to, find 4th. And Roadrunner's a jerk. I'm not even putting a vote on Roadrunner. Right? But when we count the votes, we only look at everyone's first choice. And in order to win, you need a majority. And so we count up all the first choice votes. In this case, Daffy Duck is in the lead, 38%, but does not have a majority. So what we do is we eliminate the candidate that came in last place. In this case, it's Wile E. Coyote. And anyone who voted for Wile E. Coyote, their votes go to their next choice. And then we recount. And if someone has more than 50% of the votes, great, we have a winner. And if not, we repeat the process again. So in this case, Sylvester Cat, my choice, gets eliminated, but that's okay because I really like Bugs Bunny. My vote's going to go to Bugs Bunny. Everyone else who voted for Sylvester Cat has their vote goes to their next choice. In this case, we still don't have a winner, so we finally eliminate Roadrunner, and there we have it. So Bugs Bunny wins, and we do this without vote splitting. You could have more than 2 parties, more than 2 viable candidates. People could vote their true preferences. No runoffs are needed. And, talking, trash about the other candidates, being negative, doesn't help as much because you still want to be people's second choice even if you're not their first. And there's lots of benefits with this. It leads to better representation. We get people elected who better represent the public as a whole. There's more choices, so you could have more than just 1 or 2 viable candidates on a ballot. It's completely nonpartisan, so it doesn't favor any one party over another. And it leads to more positive campaigns. As we already mentioned, there's no wasted votes. So I don't need to worry about me putting someone number one that my vote's not going to count. My candidate can't win, that's okay. It goes to my next choice. And there's even potential for saving money when we eliminate runoff elections. So this is great, but is it true? and that's kind of what we get asked a lot. And we have lots of data now. There's lots of places in the US that have run ranked choice voting elections that we get to look and see what the results of those elections are. So does it lead to better representation? And what we're finding is yes, absolutely. So this is an example from New York City. They used ranked choice voting in 2021. They've never had a majority of women in their 51 city council seats until they used ranked choice voting. So prior, the highest was 18, and now they have 31 women in their city council. And we're seeing this across the board. When we run ranked choice voting elections, you get more diverse candidates running from both politically, ethnically diverse, and more women, minorities, people of color run for office, more women, minorities, people of color win, just because more are running. And it's closing that gap a little bit between how our elected officials look compared to, and their values versus the public as a whole. There's also testimonials from that election where people said, "Oh no, we're gonna split the vote. Candidates of color are gonna split all the votes and spoil the election with ranked choice voting." And of course, that didn't happen, and the candidates knew that. So even though Maya Wiley came in third place, she was like, she really was happy that ranked choice voting was used. Were campaigns more civil is another thing we get asked a lot. And again, yes, it's not going to end all negativity. No one's claiming that. But if we look at the New York City election again, the tone of the election was more positive. Now, a lot of people said there was no change. In fact, the majority did in that specific case. What we find is over time, as we use ranked choice voting more and more, candidates learn that it's not a winning strategy to be negative. And so the elections become more and more positive, and that's what we see in Minnesota, where they've been using ranked choice voting for several years now. We even get co-campaigning. So some people will run ads together, and this is a real ad campaign from Maine where candidates campaigned together and said, vote for me first and her second, or vote for her first and me second. We're close on the issues. She would be an incredible candidate. And so there's no reason to put her personally down or anything. We would both be incredible candidates, and this is why. We get asked, are voters happier? Do voters like this when it gets implemented? And overwhelmingly, again, yes. And I'm using, just stick with the same set of data as an example would be New York City again, where 79% of voters said they like this, they want to continue using it forward. And we're finding this across all places that use ranked choice voting. And there's lots of reasons given, mostly a lot of them that I already stated, where they want to see majority winners, they want more choices, they enjoy the positive campaigning, the more focus on issues. Voters love that they're not wasting their votes, which I think it's insane that oftentimes we go and vote for someone other who's our top choice because we're worried about throwing away a vote. And they're, with that, they're able to voice more than even one true preference. So, is ranked choice voting easy to use? And this is one of the myths that we hear a lot, where people come to us and they say, it's too complicated, people aren't going to understand it. And so, spoiler, by saying that, of course it is very easy to use. People know how to rank things. I could ask my little nieces and nephews what their favorite ice cream flavors are, and they could tell me, well, I like chocolate first, and I like mint chip second, and strawberry third. We all know how to do it. In New York City, 95% of people asked, and this was the first time they've used ranked choice voting in that city, said it was easy to use, or fairly easy to use. And this is similar in other cities that used it. It was 86% in San Francisco when they first used it in 2004. It was 90%. And one of the real key insights here that I want to point out is that as it gets used in the following election, that number just keeps creeping up to 100% because obviously it is really easy to use. So, leads to better representation, more positive campaigns. It's easier for voters. Voters are happier with the results. So you might ask, well, why isn't this happening everywhere? And I would tell you, well, you're right. In 2000, there were a few places using it. We had it in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and one city in Delaware, and Louisiana used it for special overseas elections for military voting. But, right, people started realizing this is kind of a no-brainer. And so by 2012, it popped up in many other cities, including several big cities, Santa Fe and New Mexico, several cities in Colorado, San Francisco, Oakland, Minneapolis. And by the end of last year, it's been implemented or passed in many, many cities and states. Maine and Alaska are particularly noteworthy. They use it statewide. There's many cities, including across the board. There's a lot of southern cities that use it for military overseas voting. Nevada, Wyoming, Kansas, Hawaii all used it for the presidential primaries in 2020 on the Democratic side. So it's getting used all over the place. One pin that you could see there in Illinois is Evanston, and we're really, really proud that it passed in Evanston in 21. And so if you've been to any of our statewide meetings, we have one every month. We like to show, how is this growing in Illinois? What does it look like? And we show it with this little bar chart where we have these little gray bars that represent how many supporters there were for FairVote Illinois, which is a good proxy for how well it's supported across the state. And when we organized in 2020 is where that stops. Till today, it really started taking off. And so every month we see this really rapid growth and more and more people are signing up and supporting ranked choice voting. And for this year, we have an ambitious goal, but realistically, we think that trend could keep continuing. As I already mentioned, Evanston adopted ranked choice voting in 22. They will use it starting next year for their city elections. And it passed in an absolute landslide. So over 82% of voters voted to adopt ranked choice voting. There was a non-binding referendum in 22 as well in Berwyn, and we saw a similar thing. Over 82% of voters said, yes, ranked choice voting makes sense, it's a good idea. At the state level, there is a lot of support for presidential primaries in particular in Illinois, which would be really beneficial. So we think there's a really good chance that in 28, Illinois could be using ranked choice voting for presidential primaries. And each primary independently, but when you have these large fields, it makes sense to be able to vote for your candidates without worrying about wasting your vote. Right now, there's a task force in Illinois that was approved by the General Assembly and signed into law by the governor that is studying the implementation of ranked choice voting. So they want to make sure what is it going to cost, what counties are ready, how do we do this statewide so that we're ready for 2028. And in order to pass things at the state level in Illinois, we can't do it through a ballot initiative, so it has to go through the legislature. So it's great that there's support. It's great that there's this study going on. We're really happy with that progress. At the city level, any city with home rule authority, which we could get into, can adopt ranked choice voting as long as they do it through a referendum. So that's how Evanston did it. The city council put a question on the ballot, and the people of Evanston voted, again, overwhelmingly, to adopt ranked choice voting. And there's many other cities that are very interested. Oak Park has lots of interest. It's one of our target cities that we think there's just loads of support in the city itself. There's lots of support on the village board. So that's a city that's being considered. Chicago makes a lot of sense for all the reasons I showed earlier with the previous mayoral elections and the aldermanic races, and there's support in Chicago as well. There's a group in Naperville that's pushing for ranked choice voting there. There's a group in Bloomington and Normal that's also advocating for ranked choice voting. We think there's a good chance of it being there. And we're meeting here in Skokie. This is also a great city that we should be adding to this list. So that's why it's on there. The way we've been doing this is we approached our organization and wanted to do things the right way. We go and do presentations like these. We try to have honest conversations, talk to people in the public, just spreading the word. We think this is one of the easiest things to advocate for. It's really shouldn't be controversial in our opinion. There's not much reason for it. So getting the word out is really one of our main focuses. And we're out doing presentations, out at farmers markets or clipboarding, canvassing. We set up tables wherever possible. We're very active on social media, and we do lots of letters to the editor, ways to get out into the media. Another way that we're trying to grow support is by having partners. And in Evanston, if it wasn't for Reform for Illinois and the Democratic Party of Evanston, who were big supporters of that campaign, maybe it wouldn't have happened. So we have lots of partners already, and we continue to talk to organizations, get endorsements, and build support that way. For anyone here who wants to help, there's some real easy ways. One of the easiest ways is to keep that line, that trend going, and that's to sign up. And what that does is you'll be on an email list, you'll get updates about what's going on, opportunities to help out. But it also demonstrates support. So we use that, our elected officials, they care about that. You can follow us on all the social media sites, that helps as well. We always seek endorsements from organizations, or if anyone's part of a group that would like one of these types of presentations, we could do that as well. And as was mentioned in the beginning, I do this as a volunteer. We have one person who's a paid employee. Otherwise, we're all volunteers. And so, another way of helping is donating. It goes a long way. And with that, I know I didn't use all the time, but hopefully we can make this happen. We like to leave lots of time for questions so that we can get into more details about whatever people are interested in.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. So in just a minute, you'll have a chance to ask your questions, and we do have a good, healthy amount of time. I already have 3 questions I want to ask, but I'll let you ask yours first. So you can think now about the questions you want to ask, and we're going to have a musical interlude, during which we ask you to consider making a contribution to the Ethical Humanist Society. You can make those contributions on our website. There will be a link in the YouTube chat, or there's a QR code at the back if you need to get to that, or in a basket by the door. It's through the generosity of all of us that we here at the Ethical Humanist Society can show how meaningful these Sunday morning programs are. We suggest a donation of $5, but any amount you feel comfortable with is perfectly fine, including none. We really, really are grateful to everyone who volunteers with their donations of time and money. So with that, a brief musical interlude. Okay, welcome back. If you're in the audience, you can line up here at the microphone to ask your question. If you're online, I'll be reading questions on your behalf. And I think Andrew wants to introduce a colleague as well.
Okay. Yeah, I have up here with me, this is Larry Garfield. He's our speakers lead at FairVote Illinois. He's also a member of the board. He's been with FairVote Illinois for as long as I have, maybe longer if possible. And so,
We showed up at the first meeting together.
okay. And so, yeah, he's up here as well, just to, tag team questions, so you don't have to listen to me only.
Great. Thanks so much for your talk. I had two questions. One of them is a very short, just clarifying question, which is if there's a candidate pool with like 15 people and you only know about some of them, does ranked choice voting work fine if you just rank like your top 3 and then leave everyone out? Like kind of like you did with Roadrunner?
Yeah, so the question, everyone heard the question? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so you don't have to, you can rank as many or as few candidates as you like. And so what you're actually saying is that after these candidates, these are the candidates I like. After that point, I have no preference, essentially. So if they happen to all get eliminated, that's okay. It's just, you're saying I have no preference after that. And with a long list of candidates, it's sometimes preferred to just say, these are the candidates I want to win, and after that point, I have no preference.
Great, thanks. And then my other question is, I was just curious if there's active opposition to ranked choice voting, if there's some politicians that actually, even if it's better for all of us, if there's some politicians that do actually suffer because they could have won the other system but they can't win this one, or if it's more just like a inertia that drives our current system.
So overwhelmingly, the primary obstacle to RCV adoption is awareness. People just don't know about it. They haven't heard about it yet. Most people, when they hear about it, they like it. That's been our experience. There are political figures that oppose RCV. In practice, it's, I would argue, mostly people who, like you said, benefit from vote splitting, benefit from the current system, or party bosses who like that they can control the party through the primaries. And RCV would weaken that ability to manipulate things through the primary system. I see that as a positive, but obviously people who benefit from that system would disagree.
I'd like to hear more about the task force in Illinois that's looking at this. I mean, who's on the task force? Do they have any kind of deadline as to when they're supposed to produce some sort of report to the public? What then happens?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a task force in Illinois. This is went through the General Assembly, signed by the governor. It's going to be it's a 20-person task force. Not all the assignments have been made yet, so it's not meeting yet. It hasn't, but those positions are being filled. It's being filled by members of both parties. So there's members from the House and Senate, Illinois House and Senate side.
May I ask
sure.
who decides who's on the task force?
Yeah.
Is that the governor? Is it?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yeah. So each party nominates one person from the House, one person from the Senate, or I'm sorry, 2 people from the House, 2 people from the Senate. And the governor's office nominates 4 people total. The 2 people in the House, 2 people in the Senate also choose 2 people each from the public, and they nominate them. And so should be split along party lines. The 4 people from the governor's office, at least 2 of them have to have some kind of elections administration experience. Probably all 4 will, or have some form of experience or knowledge about how elections are run. The purpose of the task force is not at all should ranked choice voting be adopted or not. It is completely what would it take to implement. So each county administers their own elections in Illinois, and you have to have the appropriate equipment. Many of the counties in Illinois already have equipment that support ranked choice voting. The ones that don't are ready for upgrades anyways, and all new voting equipment supports ranked choice voting. That cost is part of what the task force is looking into. And then how do you go about tallying the votes afterwards? They're just working through that so that when, I say when, ranked choice voting gets passed statewide in Illinois, there's a plan for carrying out the implementation.
Yeah, I'm going to cheat and ask 3 questions, but you obviously can rank the order of which you want to answer. The first question is really about thresholds, like when is the minimum number of candidates that it makes sense to have ranked choice voting? Clearly, if you have 2 candidates, it's one or the other, but is 3 candidates is it ranked choice effective in that situation? The flip side of that is the maximum threshold. At what point do you get well beyond what ranked choice voting can adequately handle? The second question is, we've had an effort, obviously in the last few years, to deliberately undermine the confidence in elections with ranked choice that introduces some complexity. How do we insulate efforts to deliberately undermine the confidence in the election when you add a certain dimension of variability? And finally, related to that somewhat is gaming. Like, what is the experience of gaming the election? So, for example, if you have multiple candidates, one of the strategies is to vote only for your favorite candidate and not to vote for any other candidate. And that way, then you know that you're not diluting your vote, so to speak. So, is there any concerns about the gaming of ranked choice voting and how we can avoid that?
Oh boy, a lot here. So, I think this is in order. Ranked choice voting, I would say, is usable in every election. It makes sense in every election. If there's only 2 candidates, it looks exactly like plurality does now, so there's no change. If there's 3 candidates, you already get a benefit just from 3 candidates. Is there an upper bound? Mechanically, no. The upper bound is the number of candidates that a human can bother thinking about. And I'm not going to speculate on what that number is. I know New York had a successful RCV election with 15, 20 people running for mayor.
I think around there.
Yes, some absurd number, but they still ran an effective RCV election that people understood and supported the results of. So there's no hard upper bound on it. Let's see, what is your third question?
The second question was efforts to deliberately undermine the confidence, in other words, to challenge the validity.
So, yes, we need confidence in our elections, both in the process and the implementation. RCV is an improvement in the process. The implementation has to be honest no matter what, and that's a separate question from RCV. RCV does not make an election harder or easier to fiddle with, as you do still need to have trusted people administering the election, and all of the same guidelines about spot checks afterwards and limited hand recounts as for validation, all of that kind of stuff. All of that still applies with ranked choice voting, and it works essentially the same way as a safety check. So it's a separate question, and election validity is absolutely an important thing to do, but they don't directly relate to each other. And the last one was
The
gaming a system. So I'm going to go into a little bit of nerd theory here. There's actually a whole bunch of different alternative voting mechanisms out there in the ether. RCV is the most popular of them, in part because it is the hardest to game. If there are election systems where instead of ranking candidates 1, 2, 3, you have like 8 points you distribute to all of them however you like, or approval voting where you say yes or no to each candidate individually, and systems like that. In all of those, supporting multiple candidates can hurt your preferred candidates. With RCV, because nothing happens with your second choice unless your first choice is eliminated, ranking everyone on the ballot does not hurt you. Your whole vote still counts towards your first place choice until and unless they're eliminated, and then your whole vote counts towards your second place choice, and so on and so on. So of the improved voting systems, it is the least gameable, I would argue.
Question from an online viewer. Have you had any luck discussing ranked choice voting on television networks, particularly those that cater to opposite sides of the aisle, like Fox News and MSNBC, for an example?
Okay, really quick on the voter, just to add to what Larry was saying too, on the voter, worrying about voter integrity. One thing we could do is, lots of places that use ranked choice voting, they publish the cast vote record, which doesn't show anyone's name, but it shows like each ballot so that anyone, it's open to the public, could tally the votes themselves. And that restores a lot of confidence as well, because you could, I mean, I could do this at home. If you're a nerd like me, you get out a spreadsheet and you count them yourself. So, for media on television, I had one appearance on Chicago Tonight, which was really great. It was they do great broadcasts where they give a more extended time than most news shows for a specific topic. So it was great to get on TV that way. The challenge is typically about getting on TV. Now, there are some prominent figures who talk about ranked choice voting on various news sites, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. Kinzinger in Illinois is an advocate for ranked choice voting. He spoke about it several times. We've had lots of political figures who are speaking up more and more about it. Mitt Romney speaking more about it recently. On the Democrat side, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and others have been supporters who have spoken about it from time to time as well. Andrew Yang is a huge advocate. The Forward Party is largely based on one of their big initiatives is really getting ranked choice voting adopted. But as a group, it's more, we've been on the radio many times, and as we grow, I think the opportunity for TV appearances will expand as well.
So I live in a distant town in a collar county, and if there were a number of citizens available to work on this, can you give me a step-by-step procedure of how we would implement this?
So thank you. We'd love to work with you on that. The process does vary somewhat depending on the city. Almost every city in Illinois is a home rule city, which means that they can adopt RCV through referendum. That referendum can get on the ballot either through the city council or through a citizen petition, citizen-initiated referendum. Which one is better is going to depend on the city. In Evanston, we found we'd rather go through the city council. There was good support for it there because we don't want it to be an adversarial process. We want elected officials involved in it and in improving the system. In a couple of other cities we're looking at, we'll probably be going through the citizen referendum route, simply because the city council is either not necessarily opposed, but disinterested or politically deadlocked, and so doesn't want to do anything, and so forth. The general strategy is figure out what arguments are going to sell best in that city. Some places the lack of, or the reduced hostility is going to be a winning argument. In some places, the saving money on runoffs is going to be the strongest argument. In some places, it'll be something else. And so, get a sense for, in that community, what is going to be the strongest argument. They're all valid, but, what do we want to lean on? And then voter education. For Evanston, we spent 2 years canvassing at farmers markets, train stations, and so on, and building up support. We partnered with organizations like the DPOE that had a good reach in the community. And as I said before, the biggest obstacle to RCV adoption is simply awareness. When I get to talk to someone about RCV just on the street, 90% of the time they come away liking it because it's a self-evident improvement. We need to get out there and talk to people. So the best way to do that and build it up in a new city, get a core 2 to 3 people who can just start canvassing. Talk to people on the street, talk to people train stations, wherever you can find them. Farmers markets work great, we found. Music festivals would be good. And just get the word out. And once you generate buzz, that can get the attention of the city council or enough people to put together a petition to put something on the ballot, depending on the strategy you're going with. So that's kind of the general plan, subject to customization for each city.
I have another question from another online viewer. Does the fact that conventional runoffs require a majority of votes to be elected, in your opinion, weaken the argument for RCV?
No. So I will say having a separate runoff election is better than simply electing someone with a plurality. However, Chicago in 2019 spent $3.3 million to run a runoff election between two candidates who together didn't get a third of the vote. That's what runoffs get us. Okay, we have someone who wins with a majority at the end of that, but are they really representing the city? That's not a good argument. If that election had been run with RCV, then we would have had someone win in the first election with a clear majority. Everyone could have voted their first preference and then whittled it down to the winner. And we would have saved $3.3 million. And what can Chicago do with an extra $3.3 million? The mind boggles. In the run-up to the last mayoral race in Chicago this past year, I saw people on social media saying, I'd really love to support Sophia King, she's my preference, but I really hate Vallis, so I have to vote for Johnson to make sure Vallis doesn't win. And I have no opinion about any of those candidates. I don't live in Chicago. But just that way of approaching an election is fundamentally broken. But that's what having a runoff still makes us do, to make sure that the right candidate gets into the runoff. With ranked choice voting, that whole problem disappears entirely, and we save money.
I have two brief questions. Is there a movement to have ranked choice voting for our federal presidential elections? And if so, where are we on that, and what are the obstacles to achieving that goal? Should I just ask my first question, you answer it, and then I ask my second question?
So every state is responsible for its own elections. So every state could adopt RCV to select the electors for that state right now if they wanted to. There's no blocker to that. If we wanted to do a national RCV vote, which personally I would love, we run into the whole electoral college problem, which is a whole ball of wax onto its own. But Illinois is absolutely within its rights to decide tomorrow, we're going to use RCV for the presidential election, and that'll select the electors for the state. If the legislature wanted to do that, they could do it today.
And are there states that already do that?
Is Maine doing that yet?
Maine should be.
I believe Maine is.
And similar question, how many countries are doing this already?
Ireland and Australia have been using it for a century. There's a number of countries that use it for some offices, but not others. Like they'll use it for prime minister, but not for the legislature, for example. I believe India is one of those. There's a number of cities outside the US that use it as well. And it's been used for like 10 years now by the Oscars. So if it's good enough for the Oscars, it's good enough for me.
They're doing it, then I'm sure we can do it too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
RCV as a concept is 150 years old. It's not a new idea. It's tried and true, and we know what the practical implications are in practice. So it's not experimental anymore.
I'm just wondering, outside of your website, where can I find you guys online, with Facebook, Instagram, and especially places like TikTok where you can reach younger voters? Because I know as a Gen Zer, a lot of us are ready for some kind of change. I'm able to vote. I turned 18 6 months ago. Thank you, thank you. And I want to feel like my vote counts, but with the current voting system, it doesn't feel like it. So I know if you could reach, is there somewhere I can find you on platforms like that?
Yep. Yeah, so we are on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, although we're not super active yet, right? And that's an area where we're trying to expand. And you could find us at FairVote Illinois. It's spelled out now instead of, I think. Oh.
may vary by platform.
I think-
FairVote Ill or FairVote Illinois.
Yeah. And then if you want to get involved with a social media team, our social media team is now moving along quite nicely. They're doing some incredible work. They post a lot on Instagram and Facebook, and then separately on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it. And again, TikTok is an area where we're trying to make more little videos, and because you're right, there's a whole big demographic of people that we're just not reaching, and that's a really easy way of doing it. So.
If I could ask you a question real quick, are you on TikTok? Okay, you post there frequently?
Yeah.
Great. You're now part of our social media team. You're in charge of TikTok.
I mean,
Join us.
I'm down. I'm part of the social media team for NAFME at my college, so yeah.
Great. Let's talk and get you involved.
Awesome. I have a question. Is there any case where ranked choice voting is used not to vote for candidates, but to vote for like a referendum issue? You know, mostly when referendum issues come forward, it's yes or no. They're binary choice. Do we want more funding for this or that? As opposed to like, do you want this level of funding or that level of funding? Or sometimes, you know, sometimes life oftentimes doesn't have binary choices. I'm just wondering, is there an example of it being used that way, or is there any conversation about it being used that way?
I'm not aware of anywhere using it in that fashion, but it would certainly work. An example there, Evanston, I'm from Evanston, does participatory budgeting. And so we just had our participatory budgeting election where it's like, okay, here's 16 proposals, vote for 7 of them. I look at that and go, why is this not RCV? That would make complete sense here because it's still either or questions, and potentially, you know, depending on the budget, we could even select multiple this way. So, you know, why aren't we doing that? I'm not aware of anyone doing that, but we should.
Well, you're very convincing about the benefits of RCV in all sorts of situations, but the other big problem with our elections is parties. We have political primaries. Now, those would be helpful with RCV voting. For example, a presidential candidate who never got more than 20% in the primaries wouldn't become president. Okay, looking back in history. But is there a way to eliminate the party aspect to this? Is there a purpose for party primaries? Because it automatically sets up us versus them no matter what. And then you end up with a Republican versus a Democrat again.
A couple of pieces to that. One, if you want to take parties out of it somewhat, you have the Alaska model. What Alaska's doing, which you can do but RCV doesn't apply, is they have one big open primary now for everyone regardless of party, and you vote for one person. And then the top 4 candidates from that, regardless of party, go to a general election, which is then RCV election. The idea there being, if the voters want to choose between 3 Republicans and a Democrat, they get to do so. If they want to choose between 3 Democrats and a Republican, they can do so. If they want to choose between a Green, a Democrat, and 2 Republicans, they can do so. And then you get an RCV vote for that. So that is one option. Alaska's doing that now. Nevada is trying to switch to that. Most places with RCV are still keeping partisan primaries. There is an argument that the partisan primary is still helpful as a sorting mechanism. We have a member of our team who is a strong advocate for keeping partisan primaries, not to strengthen parties per se, but to the organization that a party provides still has value. As an organization, we have no preference on this matter. You know, internally, we have differences of opinion on it. That is very unlikely to happen in Illinois. We have talked to members of the legislature who are pro-RCV and are like, yeah, getting rid of partisan primaries is never happening here, so don't even try. And you know, we don't have a ballot initiative to go around the legislature for that, so we're just looking at, okay, we've got the partisan primaries, let's get those RCV, that's still an improvement. If we want to talk about other changes later, great, let's do so. Even that way, you know, even with partisan primaries, even in a gerrymandered state, RCV still has benefit even in primaries. So all of these different reforms build on each other and complement each other. We take them one at a time.
Plenty of future work to do.
Oh, yeah.
Steve stole my question, so I'll ask a different one. Sounds like at least one of you has done graduate level math work, so maybe I could ask you to get a little bit more wonky about some of the different systems that are out there. You can imagine a lot of odd things that could happen. For example, Bugs Bunny could be everybody's second choice, but nobody's first choice, so he's eliminated immediately, whereas he might have been the best compromise candidate. But maybe that doesn't really happen in the real world. So maybe can you talk about some of the different systems that are out there, if you've seen perverse results, if people are thinking about how to counteract that, et cetera?
Okay. So I appreciate the nerd question. I'm going to respond with a nerd answer. In election theory, there's a concept called Arrow's theorem, which says there is no perfect election system. Every possible election system will have a failure mode in it. The ideal case in any election is a Condorcet winner, which it's a French word, so it's not spelled anything like it's pronounced. That's the candidate who wins is the one who would beat every other candidate in a one-on-one election. And there is no guarantee that an election will even have a Condorcet winner. So it is impossible to have a perfect election. RCV's failure mode, so every election has a failure mode. Plurality's failure mode is non-majority winners. RCV's failure mode is what's often called a split middle, which is what you're describing. Everybody's second choice is Bugs Bunny, so he's the first eliminated. That is possible. In 600 elections in the United States that have used RCV in the last 20 years, we have had a non-Condorcet winner twice. Compare that to the 2022 primary in Illinois, where just for congressional and state offices, we had 9 candidates win their primaries without a majority. Is RCV perfect? No. Its failure modes do exist. They are vanishingly small compared to the failure modes we have with plurality voting today. There are possible ways to look at further improvement. One possibility in the far future would be, first, with an RCV ballot, with a ranked ballot, you can do a Condorcet check to see who would beat every other candidate. And if no one does, then fall back to RCV. No one's proposing that right now, but that is a hypothetical potential improvement in the future once we're more comfortable with ranked ballots as a society. He's the one who has the math degree.
No, I have very little to add. I think for the 2 cases that where the Condorcet winner didn't win, if we used plurality voting, very likely we would have got the same result in those 2 elections, almost for sure, right? So even in the cases where we say it's a failure mode, it fails in a sense back to what we're doing today.
So we have very low levels of voter participation in our elections. Is there evidence that ranked choice voting leads to higher levels of participation over time?
So I'll speak to it. So we get to ask this a lot, and the data is mixed. So what we do say is the data shows that it's not decreasing voter participation, but there's not clear data out. It's just too hard to, with all the different factors that come in, to say it's increasing voter participation, at least at the time of first adoption. Yeah. So
All right.
yeah.
Seeing no one else lined up, I think I'll ask the last question. You mentioned that RCV really helps increase representation, not only in terms of racial, ethnic, or gender representation and who gets elected, but also in who runs. And I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about why that is, or the magnitude of that, or what causes that, and what evidence we have to know that that's happening.
So I'll start with an example. 2020 Democratic presidential primary. You had Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders both running, who were very close on issues. They had almost the same platform. And they were competing for the same voters. And so you had all the Bernie Sanders supporters yelling at Warren, oh, you need to get out of the race so you don't split the vote. And you had all the Elizabeth Warren supporters saying, oh, Bernie, you need to get out of the race so you don't split the vote. Guess what? They split the vote. However you feel about the particular candidates, that's a problem. With RCV, that goes away, which means if you're worried about splitting, if I want to run, but I don't want to split the progressive vote, the MAGA vote, the black vote, the female vote, the Hispanic vote, whichever vote group you're talking about, you don't need to worry about splitting anymore. So, if you want to have, 2 strong black candidates run, cool, okay. Maybe they'll win, maybe they won't, but they won't hurt each other by running. Which means if you're a candidate from a minority group, you can look at that and go, oh, so I'm not going to undermine, the other X candidate by running. We can actually support each other if we want to, and if we're agreeing on issues, and that makes it easier for either one of us to win. Cool, let's do that. Speaking to a party out in the west suburbs a couple of weeks back, and they were saying their problem is they have a multi-seat election for city council, and it's nonpartisan, but the 2 parties are still mostly in control. And they want to have the number of candidates running that there are a number of seats. It's 4 seats in that case. But there's other people who want to run in their party. And I don't want to tell you don't run. I feel terrible telling you to not run. But really, please don't run. Because you're not going to win, but you're going to split enough votes that the other party picks up an extra seat. And the main reason they're interested in RCV is they hate doing that. They hate saying, please don't run to somebody. With RCV, they don't need to. If there's 8 Democrats running for 4 seats, okay, no problem. If there's 8 black candidates running for 4 seats, cool, okay, doesn't matter. And that's really where RCV helps improve the representation, because more people can run from more backgrounds without undermining themselves. It also arguably has an impact because of the reduced negative campaigning. If there's overall less negative campaigning, that also means, well, less racially charged campaigning and less gender charged campaigning and so on. It's not, again, it doesn't completely eliminate it, but reducing negative campaigning is going to reduce negative campaigning. So that helps as well.
You might have to help me get this question right. But I think one of the unintended consequences of primary elections is that it has increased polarization, because the people that tend to vote have hardened values, and the campaigners who want to appeal to them appeal to those hardened values, and polarization increases. And is there any evidence, or can you make an argument that RCV will help mitigate this kind of situation?
The example I'll give you there is Virginia governor's race in 21, 22? I don't recall which one. I don't remember which year they have their elections. But the Republican Party used RCV for their primary to select their governor's candidate, who was challenging an incumbent Democrat. And they selected, through RCV, a reasonably moderate Republican, who then went on to win. A far-right Republican, which is what a plurality primary is more likely to select, would probably not have fared as well because, well, they're far something. RCV tends to elect candidates who have broad support. That doesn't mean moderate. It means candidates who have the broadest base of support among their voters, which may not always mean moderate, but it usually means not extremist. So a RCV primary is more likely to select broadly supported candidates rather than someone who only can pull 30% of the 20% of the voters of that one party who are, rabidly in support of whoever. So, one of the benefits of RCV is it makes it harder for extremists to win a crowded primary because they'll probably get eliminated in round 2 or 3. Not every time, but usually that's what would happen.
Could you explain just a little more, like why there's less incentive for the negative campaigning?
Yeah. So when you're campaigning in an RCV election, what candidates find is that even if I can't be your first choice, if I want to win, it's in my advantage to be your second choice or your third choice. And if I start attacking other candidates, voters who like them number 1 suddenly don't like me so much, as their number 2, number 3. And it doesn't really take long for candidates to learn this. Sometimes it takes more than the first election. So what you see is in places that adopt ranked choice voting, first election there's kind of negative, but over time that negativity, diminishes. It doesn't go away completely. There's always going to be negativity, and you get negativity from, outside groups as well. But the candidates tend to focus a lot more on the issues, and it just serves their best interest to do so.
Well, I think that was our last question. Seeing no others, let's go ahead and give a round of applause to Andrew and Larry. Thank you. I have a couple of society announcements to make, and these folks will stick around for coffee hour, so you can ask them more questions as they come up to you in the next couple of minutes.
We love Q&A.
All right, so here are some announcements that are going to be projected on the screen above me. Please do join us for coffee hour each week after the Sunday program. This is a great opportunity to catch up with old friends, to make new friends, welcome new faces. If you can bring some food now and again to the kitchen and contribute, that would be great. And also sign up to help out once in a while. Our film discussion group meets again virtually on Monday, January 8th, tomorrow at 7:15. We'll discuss Maestro, now streaming on Netflix, and Oppenheimer, available on Amazon Prime. You can contact our office for the link. Our next game night will be Friday, January 12th, beginning at 6 p.m. Join us in our lovely new space for an evening of board games, conversation, and good company. This is a great low-key event for people of all ages. We have several games available, but please bring some of your own, and if you can, bring a dish to share. Our next community service project will be volunteering at the Inspiration Cafe in Uptown, the evening of Thursday, January 18th. Inspiration Cafe provides restaurant-style meals to those experiencing or at risk of homelessness in an atmosphere of dignity and respect. Volunteers will either help cook the meal or serve the meal, and you can participate if you are ages 18 or up. The time slots are either 4 to 7 or 5:30 to 7:30, depending on the job you sign up for. Use the link in today's bulletin, or if you want to participate in this fun and meaningful activity, see Carrie Ost with questions. Next Sunday, January 14th, we'll have a Community Day program on 2024 Forward and Back. The new year is classically a time to set new goals, reinvent what is possible. But what of the past? EHS member Ray Berg will lead the group in a discussion focusing on what do we want to take forward from the prior year and set realistic goals for the year ahead. On Sunday, January 21st, Alvin B. Tillery, Jr., Director of the Center for the Study of Diversity and Democracy and a professor of political science at Northwestern University, will present Evanston Reparations, Lessons for Designing Racial Equity Programs. In 2019, Evanston became the first city in the country, Evanston again, rocking it, to approve a government-funded reparations program, which is meant to address the housing discrimination its Black residents faced between 1919 and 1969. Professor Tillery will discuss the results from the Evanston Reparations Research Collaborative Community Survey of Evanston, Evanston's unique approach to debating, legislating, and funding its reparations ordinance, and how the Evanston model can help other cities design popular racial equity programs. For more details on upcoming Sunday morning programs and other activities, see our website at ethicalhumanistsociety.org, connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for videos of past speakers and for future streaming programs. We don't have TikTok yet, but I heard somebody said they're really good at TikTok, so maybe we're gonna tap into you. All right, if you're a newcomer, please sign up if you didn't have a chance at the welcome desk. You can also sign up to get on the FairVote Illinois list at the table back here. And I wanted to just close with a quote from former US Senator Barbara Boxer. Every citizen of this country should be guaranteed that their vote matters, that their vote is counted, and that in the voting booth, their vote has as much weight as that of any CEO, any member of Congress, or any president. Thank you, and enjoy coffee hour.